We are live.
Hello.
Wait a bit for people to jump in. There we go. Seeing a few people trickle in. Welcome.
Good morning, good
Hi.
morning, good morning.
Morning.
Good afternoon, good night, maybe.
Yeah,
Wherever you
almost,
are.
It's almost afternoon for me.
There you go.
Oh, yeah, nice.
We're going to take a few seconds, just let people trickle in, then we'll
Yeah.
kind of get started with a few introductions and rules, guidelines.
Establish some ground rules here.
We need to come up with some quick
Like
nothing
banter.
questions in the
I know.
beginning. Yeah. Like, what's your favorite coffee? I don't know.
Oh, that's a good one. The kind that is hot and black,
Yeah.
served in a mug.
And lots of caffeine.
Yep. The one that keeps me awake in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a dumb question.
Basic variety.
I think we're getting dumb answers.
Just finished mine, actually.
It was a big deal. In a town, our closest town is 5,000 people, and they just got a coffee shop. It's a big deal. It's not a Starbucks, but they make pretty good coffee.
Well, there you go.
So we're trying to encourage everybody to go buy coffee so the place stays.
So it's, yeah.
That town's going to
Sticks around.
explode now.
Yeah.
Gonna boom.
Just wait. People are going to be coming in droves.
All right. So looks like we have a pretty steady group of people in now.
Pretty good.
Hey,
Why don't we go ahead
yeah.
and introduce everyone? My name's Jacob. I'm the training coordinator at QSC, and I'll just be helping to moderate the webinar here. So you won't hear a ton from me, but you will hear a ton from the rest of the people that you see in front of you. We have Jason, who's going to be leading the charge. He's going to be teaching the webinar, talking about TouchMix. But then we have Stu and Golden. You guys want to go ahead and say hi?
Hey there.
How's it going?
They're going to help answer all the questions that come through and help Jason out with some of the topics that he's going to be chatting about.
Definitely.
Before we do get started, we do have a couple of ground rules. Jason, do you have that slide?
Let me go ahead and...
The Coolamundo slide.
Here we go.
All right.
So we are allowing attendee participation. We are hoping for attendee participation. That's kind of the idea behind doing this in a webinar format. But there is a lot to cover today. That is a dense topic, and I've got the lesson is going to take up a good chunk of the hour here. So we'd have to ask you to remain on topic. So we will only be addressing questions that are related to the topic that we're discussing or that I'm discussing for this session. If you do have questions that are kind of outside the topic, I would encourage you to maybe explore some of our other webinars. We will be covering a whole bunch of different topics and different features and applications and things like that throughout this webinar series. So it's very likely that your questions are probably going to be answered in a different session. Otherwise, we are happy to follow up with you over email once the webinar is over. So we like to keep this topic on topic. And there's a couple of ways that you can ask questions. We have a Q&A. We haven't enabled the chat, but we do have a Q&A available. So if you have a question, you can go ahead and ask your question through the Q&A, and either our panelists here, either Golden or Stu, can kind of answer you directly, or if it's depending on the question, it can be brought to me, and I can address it live. We're also giving you the option to raise your hand if you have a microphone and you'd like to kind of get on live and ask me a question directly. That is fine. Again, we're going to ask you to remain on topic. And if you do, you want to use that option, we are going to ask that you still include your question in the Q&A, just so that we know what your question is going to be. So we kind of want to just kind of keep this thing going, keep it on topic, and keep it streamlined because time is a little bit limited. Also, this isn't necessarily a forum for technical support issues. We do have other services for that, and I've put some information on that slide there. This is, we're teaching kind of audio concepts and principles, and we're showing you how to use the TouchMix to apply some of these mixing techniques and things like that. So that's kind of the goal of these sessions here. If you are experiencing a technical support issue, I'm very sorry to hear that, but we do have some really outstanding technical support personnel that can help you out and get you through that. So with that, the other thing that I wanted to mention, as far as participation, as far as getting your questions answered, Yes, I'm going to be going through this information at a pretty good clip because there is a lot to cover, and time is limited. So I will be going through it at a pretty decent pace. So if you feel like you get lost or you miss it, or you miss something or you're confused about something, we are going to be providing you with a recording of this once this is over. Either later this afternoon or potentially on Monday, you'll get a follow-up email from us, and we'll include the recording of this webinar. So you'll be able to go back on your own time and review parts of it that you might have missed or got confused on and things like that. So there you go. There's our kind of rundown on our participation, and we are hoping that you participate. We love getting the questions from you and getting that interaction going, and so that's kind of what this is all about, and trying to help you guys out and provide you with some useful knowledge. Did I cover it, guys? I think that's pretty well outlined.
Great.
Yeah, we do have a couple people just want to check in on this who attended the last webinar. They haven't received the email yet. Do we know, just to kind of quell that, do we know if
yes,
that's coming out?
You mean the follow-up email with the recording?
Yep.
That is going to go out today. There was a slight delay in getting that, getting the video uploaded.
Great.
So yeah, apologies for that. You will be getting that later this afternoon. Yeah, so you'll
Cool.
be able to go back and check that one out as well. So that's pretty cool. A couple of the things that I want to talk about up front here. I'll go ahead and full screen myself again. If you're following along, if you have your mixer and you're following along, that's fantastic. We highly encourage that. If you don't have a mixer, you don't have access to a mixer, that's completely fine. It's not required to participate here. It's just a way to sort of enhance your experience if you do have a mixer in front of you. Additionally, if you were able to download the files that we provided for you, that's also fantastic. So you got a number of audio tracks and a couple of scenes. The way that we have it configured for you guys to be playing your audio back is you're going to be using your hard drive or a USB hard drive to play those tracks back. I am going to be using a different method for my playback. They're the same tracks, and it's going to serve the same purpose. So I don't want there to be any confusion between kind of when I'm playing my audio back and what your process looks like. And I will go through that once we get onto the mixer. But there is a difference. I'm going to be playing my audio from a DAW software into my mixer. And if you want more information on how I configured that, you should definitely come back for the DAW webinar, because I'll be talking about all that configuration. But yeah, so my audio is going to be coming from a DAW on my computer, and the primary reason for that is because I'm also going to be streaming my mixer audio on a separate broadcast other than this Zoom call, and I think Jacob can provide the link to that stream in the chat here, so you guys can grab that stream, and that is going to allow you to listen to my mixer audio in higher fidelity through a separate web browser. So you have the web browser, which you'll be able to listen to my mixer on, and then you have my voice and the visuals through the Zoom session here.
Jason, will you be offering certification or any proof of participation for these webinars?
For the webinars, we are not. This is just sort of a kind of a standalone service that we're trying to provide. It does not provide certification. Once we get, once this crisis or this situation starts to lighten up and things go back to normal, I do offer a full day training course called TouchMix Certified Operator. It is an in-classroom course, and that does come with a certification at the end, and that is actually valid for 4 Avixa renewal credits. So if you've got a CTS credit or anything like that, that counts for those renewal credits. But the webinars do not hold any certification. No, they're just a means for us to try to help you guys out and give you guys some valuable knowledge. That was a fine question. Okay, so now the audio. Right, so my audio will be broadcasted. I will also be using a DAW to play that back, and you guys, if you're following along with the tracks, are going to be using the multi-track playback mode on your mixer itself. Unless you have a DAW and you've configured that for yourself, perfectly fine. I just don't want there to be any confusion between kind of what you see me do and what you guys might be doing to get your audio playing.
And I've put that link in the chat, so if anybody's looking for it, it's there.
Cool.
Yeah, what is today's scene?
Today's scene is going to be, we're talking about effects. So the topic today is effects. So the scenes there are 2 scenes, and I'll explain why. It says effects starting scene or effects starting scene mixdown, or MXD. So the session that I am using, the track that I'm using, is a full a 24-track session. I'm going to be using a TouchMix 30 to be demonstrating this today. If you're using a TouchMix 8 or a 16, I've also provided you with a mix down of that. So it's not the full 24-track mix. It's a condensed mix of just 8 channels that just kind of, it gives you the same idea of what that song is and what that mix is. And still allows you to follow along and play with the particular channels that I'm going to be working with today. So in that instance, you're going to want to be recalling the effects starting scene MXD, and then you'll want to get the corresponding set recording session. And I'll show you, we'll walk all through that all in a minute here. The last thing that I wanted to kind of throw out there regarding my broadcast here is something. Now, in the last session, we were using the same broadcast service called Audio Movers, and we did have a few issues with it. A few people had trouble listening to it. Either it was intermittent or choppy, or it just wouldn't work for them at all. We do apologize for that. I've tried to do some troubleshooting with that and figure that out, but the best I can tell, I haven't figured it out yet. So if we run into those same issues today, go ahead and let us know, and I do apologize ahead of time. But the other thing that I will be doing is I'm actually going to be recording you know, the stream from my mixer itself. So that will be included when you get the recording. That audio will be edited back into the recording session, so you'll be able to hear my mixer audio through the recording at a later time. So we're hoping that it's going to work, but you never can really tell, I guess. Okay, that was it. That was my super long-winded intro to this session. Hope everyone understands what we're doing and how to ask questions and how we're going to be listening back and participating. Very good. Let's go ahead and just dive right in then. I'm going to go ahead and switch myself back to my PowerPoint just for a couple minutes here. Got a couple other slides, or one slide to show you. So we got the rules and regulations. There we go. Okay, so today's session, we're going to be talking about effects, as I mentioned. We're going to break down the effects capabilities and establish a workflow for applying your effects to your mixes. We're also going to talk a little bit about what effects to apply to your channels in specific applications and how the TouchMix can actually help you with this and actually help you to kind of narrow down what effects might be best to use based on your application. So that's going to be really fun. It's going to be a really good, fun session here. So just to dive right in, I kind of look at this slide here. The TouchMix does have studio-grade effects processors that are included in the mixer, and these offer professional signal enhancements. And we do this without sacrificing auxes or additional channels, which other mixers sometimes have to do that. They have to sacrifice something to get to give you access to the effects. These are completely dedicated effects. You're not reducing your channel count or sacrificing any of your outputs or anything like that. Additionally, these effects are modeled after go-to popular outboard effects processors. So we didn't necessarily make these up from scratch. They are kind of modeled after existing processors. And in some cases, these are very specific processors, which we'll get into a little bit later as we talk about each one. So with that, let's go ahead and just get ourselves going here. Let's dive into this. I'm going to switch to my mixer view, get myself going here. And we're going to talk about effects. So we're going to start on my mixer. I'm going to go straight to my effects masters, okay? Because that's what we want to focus on. So on my main mix screen here, up in my navigation strip, I'm going to select effects masters. And we're going to go right to that screen. Hello, there we go. All right, so now these are my master channels, my master effect output channels. And so as I said, we have effects processors. On the TouchMix 30 here, we have 6 effects processors. On the 8 and 16, you're going to have 4 processors. Now that doesn't mean you have less effects. All TouchMix models have 6 effects total, which we're going to look at all 6 of them quickly here. All it means on an 8 and 16 is you have 2 less instances of them that you can use. So you can think of the effects master channels here sort of like an insert, and then you can recall any of the 6 effects into that insert. So you can have, on the TouchMix 30, you can have, 1 instance of all 6 effects, or you can have multiple instances of the same effect, or any combination, in between that you want to use. And on the 8 and 16, you need to have up to 4 instances of those. Cool. So let's go ahead and check out the effects. So to get into my effects, to view what's going on here, I'm going to simply enter into the channel strip for my effects master channels. And to do that, I'm going to press the name of the channel above its fader. So effects 1 through 6 here. like that. If I touch that, that takes me directly into that channel. And now I'm looking at, in this case, my effect. We've got a couple of other tabs up at the top that might look very similar to input or output channels. We've got an overview. We have an EQ screen. So there is a two-band EQ within your effects as well. You can route this to auxes, which we'll talk about, and you can get into the presets of your effect there. But the main tab here is the effect itself. So this is the actual effect. Now, I'm looking at a mono delay here. That is what is currently recalled into my effects 1 channel. You can see that right there. So I'm in effects 1. And if I want to change that effect out, I can hit this plus symbol right here, right where it says the name of the effect in this field here, where it says mono delay. There's a plus symbol, and I can press that, and then I get this window here, which shows me all 6 of my different effects. So I've got a mono, stereo, delay, chorus, pitch shifter, and 2 different reverbs. And we're going to go ahead and dive into all of those right now. But just real quickly, this is my effects 1, so I can configure effects 1 accordingly. And then I can use my arrow buttons if I want to get into my other effects. So if I scroll all the way through here, there's my effects 2. Looks like it's a lush reverb right now. I've got another dense on 3. I've got a pitch shifter there on 4. I've got another mono delay on 5. And another mono delay on 6. So that's how my effects are currently configured on all 6 of my processors. Additionally, if I hit the home button to get back out to my mix view, I'm back out to my faders, and instead of scrolling through with those next and previous buttons, if I wanted to just jump into any one of my effects, that way, home gets you to your faders, and then you can enter into any channel by pressing its name, just like that. Okay, so I'm just going to stick with my effects 1 here, and we'll use this to run down all of our different effects. Actually, I can just start with my mono delay here. And so a delay, in general, basically creates a repeated delay of the original signal that delays at set intervals that fade out over time. That's very, very simply what a delay does. And if you've listened to a delay, that's, you can hear that that's exactly what's happening. To put a little more simply, a delay will, delay your input signal and then just repeat it back, sort of like an echo. You can think of delay kind of like an echo. And the initial echo or delay is basically regenerated. So, you have your original signal, it gets its initial delay, and then you can basically regenerate it, or sometimes it's called a feedback. It'll feed that delay, that initial delay, back into the delay itself, and so that it feeds back and it regenerates at set intervals over time, and you can kind of choose how quickly or how long it takes for those repeated regenerated delay signals to taper out and fade away. And that works with this control here. So just to start from my basic controls, I've got my initial delay time here, that control right here, my first one that says delay. That controls the amount of time between my original signal and my first delay, my initial echo, you could call it. And then the tempo and regeneration dictate the cadence at which the remaining delays happen. So it's expressed in beats per minute here. So you can choose that in this field here. You can set the beats per minute or how, what the cadence of those delays are going to be. And then your regeneration is expressed as a percentage, and that is 0 through 99. And essentially that determines how long it takes for your delay to fade out. If you set that to 0, like this, your signal will be delayed indefinitely, forever at the same volume, at the same level. It'll just keep going at the same level, based on whatever your BPM is. Additionally, if you go all the way up, or sorry, that's backwards. I'm backwards on that one. If you set it to 0, you're only going to hear your initial delay. So you'll hear the initial, the original signal, and then the first echo, and that's it. All the way up to 99, my apologies, it will repeat that signal indefinitely at the same volume. So ideally, you kind of set this to somewhere in between. You kind of figure out where that sweet spot is. You figure out where it sounds nice to have that kind of fade out and go away over time, based on your song or based on what your application is, and you go from there. Additionally, when you're setting the tempo, I did show you can do it by selecting the field here and using your knob. If you want to see that, I'll back out just for a second here. Whoops, wrong way. There we go. I can use my dial. So this is touch and turn. I'm selecting my parameter with my left hand on the screen here, and then I can adjust its settings by using my encoder wheel here. So I can do that like that, or I can enable the tap tempo button. And when I engage that button, you can see now my knob is actually blinking, and it is blinking at the current tempo for this delay. And now I can actually tap the knob to set my tempo. So I can, there we go, now I'm reset my tempo. So that's a really nice way of just kind of, if you want your delay to sit within the tempo of your song, you can tap it and either find the quarter note or the eighth note of your song that you're using your delay with, and that will line it right up, and you got a really nice synced delay there. So that's a very, very common method of setting your delay time with tap tempo. Additionally, you've got a couple of filters here. You've got a high cut and a low cut, so that you can sort of determine which frequency band this effect is going to be living in primarily. Okay, so that is our delay. That is the mono delay. We have a stereo delay as well, which looks like this, and it is the same thing. It serves the same purpose. The only difference is, instead of a mono delayed signal, it is now actually two delays. So you have an independent delay signal or delayed effect for your left and your right channel. And so this gives you the ability to create a little bit more of a texture. It's more of a textured effect. You can kind of have your right and your left delayed set to different times, or maybe to different regenerations and things like that. So each one is kind of delaying the original signal independently, and then together throughout your stereo field, you're getting this really cool texture. And a very, very common use of a stereo delay is to create what's known as a ping pong delay. If you're familiar with that term, that's how that's done with a stereo delay, by offsetting the right and the left delay times, so it has this kind of bouncing ping pong ball effect. Very nice. So those are our two delay effects. Next we have a chorus. The chorus is a really nice effect. It's primarily used to sort of thicken signals up. On a real high level of how these work is, it basically takes your incoming signal and then it will double that signal and repeat it back on top of the original signal, but it will add a little bit of modulation to the timing and the pitch of that original signal. And it uses what's called an LFO, a low frequency oscillator, to modulate the time and the pitch of that original signal. So what you end up getting is sort of kind of a wobbly, kind of a sound of it. And then depending on how much of this you apply to your channel, you can create just a little bit of a more thick quality to it, or you can add a lot of it, and it almost gives it a doubling effect, where it's kind of doubling your initial channel. This is really popular on guitar channels. Works really well on vocals and backing vocals as well. So it's a pretty handy thing to have, especially if you want to get that cool kind of slightly modulated kind of warbling thickness to your channels. But there you go, that is your chorus effect. We also have a pitch shifter, which is also known as a harmonizer. As its name implies, it's going to take your original signal and it is going to change the pitch. But it is going to, depending on how much of this you apply to your channel, it's similar to the chorus effect, and then it is going to be kind of layering your pitch change signal on top of the original signal. So you're still kind of getting your original non-affected signal, and then you're getting the pitch shifted or pitch modulated signal blended into it as well. And this is in stereo, so you can pitch the right and the left signals differently, which has its advantages, which we'll talk about towards the end here. But it's very simple to use. I've got my shift here, so you can see my left and my right, so I can adjust my pitch on my left channel, and this is expressed in cents. So you can take these up or down just over a complete octave. And so 1200 cents, just to give you some reference, 1200 cents right there is an octave. So you can go up to 13, which is just above your octave there. I got my right and then my left. And then you can also delay these signals up to 100 milliseconds. And again, that is independent on the right and the left. So you can add some delay time to your right and your left, the pitch, and this is used to create harmonization. And so it's again similar to our chorus effect, this is a nice tool that you can use to thicken up a signal, or maybe kind of give it almost a doubled effect. This tool just gives you a little bit more control over that aspect than the chorus effect. All right, now let's talk about the reverbs. So there are two reverbs here. There is the dense reverb, and there is a lush reverb. And these two reverbs right here were actually modeled after very specific rack hardware effects made by Yamaha and Lexicon, respectively. So the dense reverb here is very tediously and meticulously modeled after a well-loved Yamaha unit. And the lush reverb is modeled after a Lexicon unit. So if you're familiar with either of those units, this might look familiar to you. And so again, this was very meticulously modeled after these two effects. So having these reverbs, these tools specifically in the TouchMix is a huge advantage. They're very well crafted, and they sound fantastic. Additionally, on top of modeling the effect itself, we've also modeled a number of presets. Again, well used and well loved presets on both of these models. We've gone so far. We ratcheted down and actually we modeled the bass effect itself, and then actually we're able to recreate some of the presets that were go-to presets in both of these units. And you can look at some of these here, and they are expressed in different types of reverb types. So just to back up a little bit and give you a little bit of background on a reverb itself, reverb is actually a naturally occurring phenomenon called reverberation. And it occurs in just about any enclosed space. If you can picture yourself in a room, say you're in a hall, maybe you got wood floors and paneling and stuff on your walls and ceiling, or whatever kind of room you're in. The natural acoustics of that space are going to affect the sound. So if you imagine a room and you imagine maybe a vocalist or a guitar player or something sitting in that room and singing or playing, so that sound is going to reach your ears directly, from that person's mouth or from their instrument. It's going to get to you directly. But additionally, that sound is going to go everywhere. So what you're going to hear is the initial sound, and then you're going to hear your first what's called a reflection. And that's going to be that sound hitting the floor and then bouncing up into your ears. That's what we call an early reflection, or your initial reflection. And then after that, it's going to bounce off walls and other surfaces, and all of those different reflections are going to reach your ears at different times. And then eventually, as those reverberations or the reflections, get more complicated, you start, each different reflection is going to have variations in pitch and phase and things like that. And so those things are what create the overall characteristics of that acoustic space. So a reverb effect is recreating that phenomenon sort of artificially, and in this case, digitally. And just to give you an idea, there are a number of different types of reverbs. I'm not going to explain what all the different types are because we just don't have the time, but I would encourage you to kind of look into this on your own. It is pretty interesting. But if you're using any of our presets, it will give you an idea of what type of reverb it is going to apply. For instance, we have plate, hall reverbs, and room reverbs. So those are just a couple of different types of reverb. There are also spring reverbs, there's convolution reverbs. So there are a number of different varieties of reverb, and they all just sort of perform a little bit differently, and it's all in how they kind of recreate those reflections and how they deal with the original sound. So definitely kind of look into that stuff. For now, we're going to be experimenting with a couple of these, but I want to show you a few things on the controls first. The most important controls that you're going to want to pay attention to here on both the dense and the lush reverb, I'll go ahead and show you the lush reverb for a little bit here, are the first two controls. So on the lush reverb here, we have a size and a pre-delay. And then moving back to my dense reverb, I have reverb time and initial delay. Those are more or less the same thing expressed in slightly different terms. But your reverb time is basically sets your initial delay. Or basically kind of the size of your space. That's determining that sort of your first, your first reflection. Yeah, so that's that initial floor reflection. And your initial delay here actually determines how much time it takes for the reverberation effect itself to start taking place, for you to actually hear the reverberation. And so this one is actually really important because this can help you kind of clean up muddiness. Sometimes if you start to delay a signal too early within its signal pattern, the delay can kind of wash some of it out a little bit, and it can kind of muddy it up a little bit. So your initial delay control here can really help you out with that. So if you get a delay dialed up and you like the sound of the reverb in general, but you're noticing it's starting to get a little washy or a little muddy, play with this control, and that can really tighten up the overall sound and bring the clarity back to that signal while still giving you that really nice reverb effect. So those are, if you know nothing else about reverb, your reverb time and your initial delay are going to be your best friends. The other controls here are essentially just dictating how the more complex reflections are dealt with within the effect itself. So you can kind of play with those a little bit, and you'll find that those are, when you affect those controls, it's a little bit less obvious at first than these controls. These are going to have pretty obvious effects when you start dialing those things back and forth. So that's going to be important to know. And on your Lush reverb here, we have the same thing. We've got the size and the pre-delay. So those are going to be dictating the same things for this delay. And the main differences between the Lush and the dense can really be expressed in their names. So the dense reverb is going to be a little bit thicker. It's also going to be a little bit tighter. It's going to give you a more of a tight kind of reverb sound. And it is more representative of an actual acoustic space. The Lush reverb is, as it sounds, it's more lush. It gives you a little bit longer reverb tails, and it's just kind of lush. This one would be very popular on something like jazz vocals, something like that. So the two reverbs are definitely going to be dependent on what you're looking for in the effect and the style or genre of music that you're going to be using them with. And again, that is largely going to be kind of up to you to determine. Effects in general are pretty subjective, and so it kind of, you're going to need to kind of have a little bit of a vision in your head. So I'm just going to show you a few things. I will go through a few applications that might work better for certain ones. But in general, you kind of just have to kind of figure out what you want the sound to be, and then dial it in there and use the controls that you have here so that you're getting a nice effect, but you're not adversely affecting the signal. You're not getting too washed out, or you're not getting you're not making the signal too unintelligible. Okay, there you go. So that is the 6 effects that we have here. Let's go ahead and start using them. I'm going to go punch out to my mix here, and I'm going to start applying some effects to my channels here. Before I do that, I do want to kind of just reiterate, just in case anybody joined late here, we do have a couple of options for you to ask questions, and I'm going to just flash this one more time. We have a Q&A where you can drop questions. Please keep your questions on topic. Again, I've got a lot to go through here in a limited amount of time. So we're going to address questions related to effects today. If you have questions that are outside of this topic, I would recommend maybe taking a look at one of our other webinars. We are going to be going over a number of other topics, but we also will, we can follow up with you via email after the webinar is over if you have additional questions that are off topic here. Additionally, if you do have a question related to the topic and you have a microphone, we will give you the option to raise your hand, and you can ask the question directly to me live over your mic. Again, keeping them on topic, please, and you're still asking that even if you do want to raise your hand, still put your question in the Q&A as well, so we can kind of get an idea of what that question is going to be. With that said, are there any questions yet, or anything that you want to bring to the front of the stage here? Silence. Cool. Then I will keep going. So at this point, we're going to start working with audio. So the first thing we're going to want to do, if you're following along, we're going to go ahead and recall our starting scene. And to get to our scenes, we're simply going to press the scene button here, which you can't see because my face is there. Or you can press menu. And then on the menu screen, you have the scenes option right here. That takes us into our scenes. And if you have your USB stick inserted into your mixer, you should have a number of these scenes here. These are stored on my mixer internally, but you should have them in this column here. If you're using a TouchMix 30 Pro, go ahead and select the FX starting scene. If you're using a TouchMix 8 or 16, you're going to want to choose the FX starting scene mixdown, or MXD is an abbreviation for mixdown. And that is just going to give you a condensed mix of the larger mix, which is just your first 8 channels. So go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and select my FX starting scene. And to do that, I select it, I hit the green recall button, and I confirm it with a yes. And what a scene is, essentially, is just, it allows you to save the complete configuration of your mixer. So all of the controls, all of the parameters in the mixer can be saved as a scene, and then when you recall that scene, it resets up all those controls based on how they were saved. And so in this case, I've created some scenes for us to start working with here that are going to correlate to our audio tracks. And what I've done, if I go back out to my home, I've given us channel names, and I've also given us channel processing, and I've got a level mix here. So I've got fader positions, I've got channel processing, I've got EQ and other processes kind of already set on all of my channels. So basically what we're going to do, we're going to pretend that we've gone through all this stage. We've built our mix, we've got processing on all of our channels, and it's sounding good. And now at this stage, we're sweetening the mix. We're going to start adding effects to things to kind of liven things up and get them to sound nice and sweet and thick. So that's our stage. So we've got our processing. Now we're going to start playing with the effects. Now to get your audio playing, you guys are going to go to the record play button here. So we're going to press that button. And then you're going to want to make sure you're in the multi-track DAW record mode. And so you get to that by pressing record mode here. And it should look like this. So if your screen already looks like this, you're there. But if you're not, you're going to want to press record mode and make sure you've got multi-track DAW selected. And this is how you're going to play your audio back. Now we're going to need to recall the session that includes the tracks that I've given you. And we're going to press record setup to get to those. And again, there are 2 sessions. So if you're using a TouchMix 30 Pro, this first one, Brown Bottle of Flu, pardon me. Just go ahead and select that one. If you're using an 8 or 16, go ahead and select the Brown Bottle Down Mix, and then it's just going to give you your first 8 channels of the mix there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select this one. And to recall that, you're going to hit the green recall button with it selected in the menu, confirm with the yes, and then when your current session field here changes to the name of that scene, you know that those tracks have been recalled. We can hit record play one more time, and then we need to arm all of our tracks. So I'm just going to go like this. Whoops, sorry, not arm, don't arm the tracks, track all of the tracks. So this track button above the arm button on all of your controls will turn green, and it will set all of your channels to track mode, which is telling the mixer that you're not using the analog preamps as your channel source anymore. You're using the channels, or you're using the recorded files that are on that hard drive to be played back into those channels. So there you go. Now you are set up to play your tracks back. From there, you can just hit the play button, and you should see your timeline start to go, and you should see your meters jump to life when the song starts, and you should hear those songs, and then you can use your main output to dial in your output to whatever speakers or headphones you're listening to this on, as if it were an actual mix. So that's what we're going to be working with today. And just to reiterate, just so there's no more confusion, I am going to be working off of a DAW. So I'm not going to be coming in from this point on. I'm not going to come into the screen to start and stop my audio. But this is how you guys are going to be operating your tracks. So I'm going to set myself up in my DAW mode here. And I want to be on 48K. And I'm just going to quickly set all my channels to track so that I can hear them. And again, so this audio is going to be played out over that separate feed that we gave you the link to. Okay, so we're good to go. We're good to play back some audio. Let's see if it worked. I'm just gonna hit my track playback real quick here and see what we're listening to. And hopefully it works for you guys. All right, I hear it. And it looks like that's going out. I'm seeing output to the stream. So hopefully you guys are hearing that. So here's our song. And we're going to start to dial in some effects. We're going to get this thing sounding pretty good. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop this for now. So in general, when you're working with effects, 99 to 100% of the time, you're going to be applying effects to the vocals. That's probably like the primary source that you're going to be working with your effects. So you'd probably start with vocals. Now, that's not to say you'd only want to put effects on vocals. It's completely up to you or what your performance is or what your style is or what you want to do. but for most workflows, you probably start with the vocals. You could also apply effects to guitars, horns, drums, things like that. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to start with my snare drum for this example, and there's a reason for that, which I will get into. But before I do that, I'm going to give myself a way to isolate some of my channels. Now, if you're using a TouchMix 30 Pro, there is a feature called Solo in Place, which will do exactly what it sounds like. And it works by changing the Q mode here. Normally, the Q mode simply just will send any channel's audio that you cue here to your Q output. You should see your Q output on the face of your mixer. You can
Jason,
yeah.
Before you jump into that, I have a great application question.
All right.
And I'm going to let Robert go live with his mic. So Jacob, if you could.
Hello, Robert. Oh, cute.
Robert,
picture.
I've unmuted your mic, so if you want to go ahead and ask your question live, you can do that.
How you doing, Robert? You might have to unmute on your end.
You might have to unmute your mic, yeah.
He also might not have a mic. Oh, no, there he is.
My apologies. My question is simple. I see that you can assign effects to each of the channels, FX 1 through 4, for example. Lush reverb on 1, dense on 2, etc.
Yep.
My question is there any benefit to, for example, we use exclusively Lush reverb for my band. And, my question is, obviously I can use Lush reverb on FX1 to lay the, effects down for all the vocals. Yep. However, my question is there a benefit to just using, for example, assigning Lush reverb to FX1 through 4, and then using FX1 for myself, FX2 for another person, etc.?
Yes, there is a big benefit to that actually, which is something that I'm going to get into in a few minutes here once we kind of play with the reverbs a little bit. But that is a really good question. It absolutely is an advantage of setting up multiple instances of the same effect to be used on specific channels instead of just sending everything to one effect. And I'll answer it now, and I'll get into it in more detail in a minute. But if you're going to be sending any of your effects to your aux mixes at any point, having a bunch of channels go to a single effect can start to be detrimental in that application, because you potentially will end up with a whole bunch of signal in that aux mix that you didn't intend to put there because it's now coming through that effect. So that's the quick high level answer, and I'm going to get a little deeper into that and how that works and how to avoid it. But yes,
thank you so much.
I have one more thing
Good
to
question.
mention before we go, because I know I'm going to get a ton more of these in the Q&A. For those who are not hearing music, the link is in the chat.
Yes.
We've noticed that we may be limited on bandwidth from the company Audio Movers. So it seems like the first 30 or so people that clicked the link have audio. And after that, it seems that we're limited on bandwidth.
So are people commenting
they're
about...
asking if they have no audio. We also noticed that those using Internet Explorer may get a message that says it's not compatible. Try using Google.
Yeah, Chrome, Chrome or Firefox maybe. Very good. So as also, if you came in a little late and didn't hear, there will be a recording of this that will be provided to you once this is over. And all of the audio that's going out to the stream right now, if you're not able to hear it, that is also being recorded. I'm recording all of that, and I will insert that back into the recording of the webinar. So when you go back and watch the recording, you will be able to hear the audio that I'm working with here that way. So if you're not getting the stream, I do apologize. We might have to figure out another solution. Maybe Audio Movers isn't the way to go here, but we're doing our best here. We're trying to work it out. So that was a fine question and comment. Thank you, Golden. Okay, getting back to this here. So if you want to isolate a channel on the TouchMix 30 Pro, you can change the Q mode basically by going into Menu, and you go to Mixer Setup, and you have a Q mode option here. You would change that to Solo in Place. And then back out on your main mix screen, you have these buttons. They say SIP, which stands for Solo in Place. Now, if you were to hit that, it would simply isolate that channel in your main output. And that's a fine feature, and that's a great feature on this board for doing exactly this, especially during your setup, your initial pre-mix and sound check and things like that, if you need to be punching through and isolating channels. The 8 and the 16 don't have the Solo in Place option, but we're going to set up another way to give us the same effect. We're going to use mute groups to do this. And go ahead and follow me on this. no matter what mixer you're using. We're going to go ahead and go to mute groups, and I'm not going to get too much into what mute groups are or how they work. There is another webinar that we're going to dive into channel groups in general and get into the specifics of these. So this is a slight tangent from the effects lesson here, but I want to do this so that we can isolate some channels. So if you see your mute groups button here, it's right there in your button cluster. Go ahead and press that. Now we have our mute group screen. And this is where I can activate any of the mute groups. There are 8 mute groups. And basically a mute group allows you to mute a number or a group of channels all at once. So if I activate mute group 1, anything that is assigned to mute group 1 is now muted. To assign my channels to any of these groups, I'm going to press this edit button right there in the upper right hand corner. And now I've got my navigation tabs here. I can select any one of my 8 groups up here. So if I want to stay in mute group 1 here, and I'm going to configure this to mute all of my channels except for my snare. So I'm going to isolate my snare drum. So to do that, I'm just going to use my assignment buttons here. I'm going to select every single channel in my mix. Now, if you're using a 30, you got 24 channels here. So you're going to mute 23 of them. If you're using an 8 or 16, you only have to mute 7 of them because you're only working with your first 8 channels in your mix. Okay, so I've got my snare isolated there, and I'm going to name this by pressing that name field there. I'll clear out the mute 1 name, and I'll just say snare solo, sulp. And then I'm going to go to mute 2, and I want to isolate my lead vocals. And on my 30 here, on my big 24 channel mix, that's channel 22. On the 8 and 16 mix, I believe it is channel 7 or 8. It's one of the last channels there. So same thing, I'm just going to select everything except for that male vocal channel, and I'll name this Vox Solo. Okay. Pressing my mute groups button one more time, I get back out to my mute group screen here, and I can see I have my snare solo and Vox Solo mute groups. If I engage my snare solo mute group, just like that, and then press the home button to get back out to my mix, I can now see all of my channels are muted except that snare channel. There you go. Pretty cool. So if I play my audio now, you should just hear that snare channel. There you go. And if you're following along, you should as well just hear that snare channel. And so that sounds pretty good. We got some processing on here. If we go into the channel, we do have a nice EQ curve on here. We also have a gate on there, which is really cleaning up and shaping that sound and bringing out the presence of that drum and the elements that we want to focus on and we want to cut through in the mix. But it is a little dry. You might notice it's kind of dry sounding. So let's apply some reverb to it, a little bit of reverb. Stop the channel here. So I'm going to go to my effects right here. So this is how we can apply effects to our channel. So we hit the effects tab from within the channel. I'm going to back out and show you that one more time. So from my mix, I can enter my snare channel by pressing snare, pressing the name of the channel, and then I'll navigate to my effects tab here. And now on this screen, I can apply any of my effects available to me. So I have 6 engines here. You can see them in the row there. On an 816, you will have 4 of them. And from here, all I have to do is slide up any of these sliders, and that will start to send this channel to any of these effects. A couple more things on this screen. Take a look over here where we have our global effects parameters. Now these are global parameters for the effect itself that are the most show critical. As I mentioned, talking about reverbs, your initial time or your delay size, and then your initial delay or your pre-delay controls are probably the 2 most important controls on your reverb there, right? And so you have those 2 controls right here on this screen. So if you need to be tweaking any of those, like say if you start to dial this guy up a little bit and it sounds really sweet and really cool, but it is starting to get a little muddy or a little unintelligible, you can grab your initial delay there and you can bring that up and hopefully bring some clarity to that. And again, what that's doing is it's adjusting the amount of time it takes for the reverb effect to start happening. So that is really advantageous. Additionally, all of these icons here are actually buttons. So if I press that button, look where I am. This looks familiar. Now I'm inside my effects channel. That took me directly into my effects 1 channel where this effect is set up. So if I wanted to affect any of the other fine controls in here, I could do that simply by pressing the effect on my effects tab there. Now, check this out. If I hit home from this position, if If I press home, now I'm back in this tab. This is one of the only instances which the home button acts as a back button instead of a direct home button. In most cases, the home button will take you directly out to your faders. You know, just about any time you hit that home button and you get to your fader mix. If you are in an effects screen here working with your effects and you go into any one of your effects masters like this, now this button, when you press it once, will simply just back you out back to this screen, and that is so that you can keep a workflow. You know, it would be kind of unintuitive to be, you know, from this position to then hit this and then get back out to your faders, and then you have to punch back into your channel, right? So no, we're just going to back you out back to this screen so that you can keep working with your overall effects for this channel. So that's a really nice thing. The other thing I want to show you on this screen before we start playing with this, I promise we're going to listen to this thing, is the simple mode. We talked about simple mode a few webinars back in the general overview here, but simple mode basically is a way to reduce and kind of condense the number of controls that are presented to you. And this is available on a number of parameters here. So if you see I hit simple on this screen and it kind of just took away all of my global parameters there. If I'm in an effect like this and I hit simple mode, again, see, it just leaves me with these two controls. So those are your most important controls. That's really what you want to focus on. And if you don't even want to have those available to you, you can just put it in simple mode and we're only focused on those. That was just a real quick thing I wanted to show you. Now, let's get some reverb. So I want to show you a particular preset here. And if I recall my dense reverb from scratch, by just selecting like that, it will automatically dial itself in with the dense live plate medium or medium plate reverb. So, and I want to show you this in particular because this is a really, really nice effect preset for snare drum in particular, but it is modeled after a vocal reverb actually. So something that was kind of common knowledge amongst mix engineer circles is that a preset or a reverb effect, a setting that is dialed in for a vocal channel also sounds good on a snare drum. So let's make sure that's called there. I'll just make sure that we got it. So there we go, D-Live plate. Okay, so our effect is just simple, our medium plate or our vocal plate here. And let's listen to this drum and see what this sounds like as we start to dial this up. So I'm gonna grab that slider, playback. There we go. Now I'm gonna go ahead and just take this way up. You can kind of just over apply it so you can really hear what that does. So there you go. So that's reverb, right? Now it sounds like it's in a space. It's echoing off of things. It's in a room as opposed to our super dry sound, right? Now, if I were gonna build a mix with this realistically, I mean, again, if you want this huge sound, you could definitely do that, but probably something a little more realistic would be something down here. So we're still hearing the effect of it, but it's still got some conciseness to it. It's not super washed out. It just sounds a little more natural, right? As opposed to the really, really dry gated sound. We add some reverb, and now our snare drum sounds a lot more natural. It sounds like it's within its space, but it is still contained, and it still sits really well within our mix. So there you go. So that's using a really cool, basically, sort of a trick is using a vocal reverb on a snare drum to kind of bring some life back to it. Now, let's go ahead and jump over to our vocal channel. Let's real quick run you through this, and then I got some fun tips and tricks for you. I know we're getting real close to time here. I'm going to go into my male vocal channel, and I'm going to actually go back into my mute groups first, and I'm going to unsolo my snare drum, and I'm just going to engage my mute group to solo that vocal channel. Then we'll hit home. Now I'm looking at the mix with my male vocal channel isolated. I'm going to go into this channel on my effects screen, and what I want to do here is apply a couple of other channels or a couple of other presets here. Let me just make sure I'm getting the right one. All right, yeah. I'm going to go to my lush reverb here. So we looked at the dense reverb on the snare. I'm actually going to show you a dense reverb setting on the vocals as well, but I'm going to start with the lush reverb to give you an idea of what this sounds like versus what the dense sounds like. And I'm going to go ahead and select the lush medium hall. Yep, here we go. So this is a hall reverb as opposed to a plate reverb, so there are differences. So I'm going to grab my lush medium hall. I'll recall that. back out to my effect. Now let's go back into my channel. I'll grab that slider. I'll get my playback. Wait till the vocals come in here. Yeah. All right, we got our vocals happening. I'm going to dial this up again. I'm going to take it to kind of an extreme level. There we are. Listen to that. Okay. So here kind of the initial difference. We'll hear the dents on the vocals so you get more of a reference. But it's just got a nice, lush, thick sound. And again, if I were to take that down to something like this, yeah. So there's our vocalist. Here's no reverb. And now I dial up the reverb. And just sweetens it. Just adds a nice quality to it. Adds a nice presence to it. And if I were to take that up a little bit, yeah. Now let's go ahead and disengage the mute group and hear the complete mix. With that vocal effect in there. And I'll take it out. Bring it up. Yeah. Sure, hear what that sounds like. Okay, let's take a look at the dents now. I'm going to go into another dents here. I'm going to recall a slightly different preset here. I'm going to grab the vocal plate. So instead of the medium plate, which I recalled for my snare drum, there is another plate reverb in here specifically called the vocal plate. So we got a dense vocal plate, which is slightly tailored more towards a vocal application. There's my effect there, my dense vocal plate. Now I'm going to use this one. We'll isolate this channel one more time so we can really focus on the sound of it and hear the difference here. And we'll play it. And take it up real high. All right. Immediately hear the difference in the coloration and the quality of this reverb versus the lush. And if I were to take it back somewhere around here, where it's just kind of sitting underneath the vocal and it's giving it some presence. And we'll return our mix and hear what that sounds like. So, sounds pretty good. This one I'm going to take this up a little bit. All right. There you go. So that is how you apply effects to your channels. There's another way to do this, actually, and there's a really nice tool on the mixer specifically, on TouchMix specifically, that can streamline this workflow. The entire process I just showed you, while it's in itself doesn't take too long, but using our tool here, which is called the Effects Wizard, is a really, really nice way to get all of your effects for your entire mix up and running extremely quickly. It is also a way to kind of go-to screen at any given point if you just want to see anything that is being routed to a single effect at any given point. And to get here, I'm going to go ahead and go into my wizards. You should be able to see that, my wizard button there. And that takes me into my wizard screen. Now I select my effects wizard, and it looks like this. Whoop, too far. Make sure I got. There we go. So here's the effects wizard. I have my tabs, which take me in and out of my different effects engines up at the top. And then I have my assignment buttons here, which is how I can route this effect quickly and easily to any of my channels, just like I did with my mute groups, right? It looks the same. This automatically will route this effect to any channel I select here. So that's instantly like speeds up this whole process. Additionally, I have a preset menu here, similar to when we looked at the presets on last week and a little bit in the week before. This is the same type of menu. And the way this is laid out is at the end here in the effects preset field. You know, are the actual presets themselves for any of your effects. But we've given you a couple of different options on how to get there. So if you don't have a lot of experience using effects and you kind of want some guidance on what effects might work for certain applications or certain channels, this source button here is laid out by instrument or vocals type, very much like our presets. So if I were to select, let's say, vocals, if I'm gonna kind of redo the process I just showed you using this tool, I say, okay, I know that I want to put effects on my vocal channel, so I can select vocals in here. And then in the next field where it says type, I have a couple of different options here. It says backing vocals, choir, or lead vocals, okay? Based on, you know, what I'm applying this effects to, I can make the appropriate choice there. And then in my last field here, it's going to show me everything that would be appropriate or applicable to a lead vocal. And it's not limited to any one kind of effect. So you do have all of your effects options in here, including reverbs, delays, and choruses and things like that. And the presets will be, you'll know what you're looking at because the preset name will give you an indication of what kind of effect it is. For instance, my first one there says chorus medium. So that's a chorus effect. After that, I have my different reverb options, and those are indicated by a D or an L in the beginning of the preset name. So that's either dense for D and L for lush. So that's how you know those are reverbs. So it's either a dense reverb or a lush reverb, by that D or that L. After that, you've got delays. You've got your mono delays, and then you got some pitch shift options, and then you've got stereo delays, and at the very bottom, you got a slap delay. It's kind of like your ping pong delay. So there you go. So you can choose any one of these and apply that, and it will automatically configure the effect in effects 1 or whatever effect you're working with to that preset and whatever that corresponding effect itself is. So if I were to do the same thing here, if I were to get lush medium hall, I can recall that. And should have recalled it up there. Let me see. Punch back in. Yeah. Nope, I want the lush. All right, so my effect name field here, I've experienced this a couple of times. This is a slight bug here. Sometimes this name field on this screen doesn't change. But if I go back and look at the effect itself real quick, there we go. So yeah, my effect 1 is now a lush medium hull. And now if I go back into the wizard, I'm going to put this on my vocal channel, right? So bam, right there. Now I've just applied that to my vocal channel. Simple. Now, keeping with the theory that, hey, you know, my reverbs for my vocals also sounds good on a snare, right? So I could just do this. I can apply the same thing to this snare. But there might be some disadvantages to doing this, which was sort of the question that we had a little bit earlier. No, this could be fine. This probably sounds awesome out in the main mix, right? And if I just take a look at what happened, if I press home and go back into these channels, if I go to my snare channel, I can see, there you go. So it has applied some of this effect 1 to my channel here. Same thing in my vocal channel. It's applied effects 1. Well, I already had that one going. We'll take that out. So it's applied the same thing there. And again, I can come in front. The wizard is just going to give you kind of this starting point. So it will just set your level to a fixed amount. If you need to adjust it from there, you can come into the channel and either give it a little more, or pull it back a little bit, or maybe adjust some of these fine controls. So the wizard is kind of a starting point. Sometimes it might be perfect. Maybe it sets it up and it sounds great and you can walk away. But it's just a way of kind of enhancing and speeding up your workflow. Again, as well as taking a look at how the effect is configured on one single screen. Okay, so now let's talk about getting your FX into your auxes. This is the point when doing something like this might start to kind of bite you in the rear a little bit. And to illustrate that, I'm going to show you just a couple of more. I'm good at spoking. A couple of PowerPoint slides. Okay, so here is what a channel signal looks like. So you have our input here. We have our audio signal coming into the channel through its input, then it's going to run through its EQ, its dynamics, then it's going to pass over the channel fader, go through the pan control, and eventually end up going out through the master output and then out to your loudspeakers. When you start applying effects to this channel, which is either using the wizard or using your sliders on your effects tabs, which I showed you, it's going to pick off the signal, okay? And then it's going to redirect a picked off version of that signal into the effect itself here. And then it's going to output that through the effects master output, right? So we have that master effects output fader. That controls the overall level for the entire effect, including any channels that are sent to it. That's important. And then it bleeds that or blends that back in with the actual dry signal. So what you're hearing is a blend of the affected signal and the dry signal kind of being blended back together in your main output. That is how effects work on even older analog boards. It's a whole sequence of sending and returning the signal out of the mixer through your effect and then back into the mixer, usually through an insert or something like that. So the TouchMix is actually doing all that routing for you, but it's important to understand what it's doing, that it is routing it this way, because when you get, whoops, wrong button, there we go. When you get to the, wait, there we go. When you get to sending it out of an aux, which I'll show you how to do right now, all you have is this control, right? So you have your effects master control here. There's that guy, which is controlling the output of the effect in general, okay? So with this slider, we're drawing the signal into the effect and then it's being blended back. And this fader controls the entire amount. When we send it to an aux, we're doing the same thing with this fader within the aux mix, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. But it's drawing the main signal, the main effect signal, and now directing that in the aux. And so the way that this can kind of be detrimental is you don't have this control in an aux. So whatever is being delivered to this effect is now going to be presented in the aux. You're now going to hear that in an aux. And so in this scenario that I've done here, by putting, I got my male vocal and my snare in the same effect, right? Now let's say our singer wants to hear the reverb in his monitor on stage. He wants to have that effect. That's fine. Here's how you do it. Let's say his monitor is aux 1, okay? From the wizard, I can simply do that. That's the easiest way to do it. Now this effect is going to aux 1. The other way to do it would be to go into the aux mix itself. So if I select aux 1 here, now I'm in my aux mix, you know, and he's probably got, you know, some sort of mix going on. Maybe he has a little bit of rhythm section. He's probably got some, maybe some guitar or piano. Or he definitely has bass usually. And maybe he has either guitar or piano to pitch off of. And he's probably got about that much of himself. Okay. Anyways, he'll have a lot of himself, and now he wants to hear that reverb. So we can come into the effects masters here, grab that effects 1 reverb and dial it up, and now he's hearing that reverb effect in his monitor. However, because the snare drum is also going through that same effect, now he's hearing a really, really big reverby, echoey snare in his monitor as well. And singers typically don't like hearing things like that in their monitor. So now we have a problem. And that is when, well, the question that was asked earlier, that is when using maybe multiple instances of the same effect to use on specific channels comes in handy, because the way to fix this is by doing just that. Instead of sending the vocals and the snare through the same reverb, I can come into the wizard, I can remove the snare from this effect, right? And maybe I just go to effect 2, and I recall the same exact effect on effect 2. And again, it's not going to show us, oh, there it worked. Okay, so I've got my same lush medium hall on effect 2, and now I send that to the snare drum. Okay, so now I've got the same effect in the main outputs. You know, I've got my vocals and my snare drum going to that our same effect, and it sounds really good. But now, when I send effects 1, which is my vocal effect, to the singer's aux or to his monitor, now he doesn't get the snare drum in there as well. So that is how you kind of fix that problem. Obviously, you know, if you start to apply effects in your monitors and things like this, this method can eat your effects processors quickly. You can start to use them up really quickly. So it's a good to be mindful of this and use this technique sparingly. But you know, a lot of times you can get away with, you know, directing a couple of channels to different instances of the same effect and then routing them into appropriate auxes and things like that. So that is the effects wizard. That is sort of your workflow. The other thing that I want to show you here is when you do work with your effects now, you can either premeditate what effects you want to use. Maybe you have a good, you know what you're mixing, you have a good idea of what you want to be applying to your different channels, and maybe you configure your effects, you know, first, or maybe you kind of like mix them in as you go. Either way, once you've got them set, or I would say once you have your initial effects dialed in on these screens, if you've recalled the specific effects you want and maybe adjusted some of these settings a little bit, come into the setup screen here and give them a name. So I know I want effects 1 to be a vocal reverb. And then I had effects 2. I know that I'm going to be splitting them, so I know I need 2 instances of that. And so maybe initially I set this up and I called it out as my snare verb. And then from there, you know, whatever my other effects are, I name them appropriately. So what that does is that when you're in the wizard, now you can actually see your names here, and also, you know, on these fader channels here. So if you're in an aux and you want to be pulling up some effects in your auxes, it's nice to have them named. So I know, okay, so this is my drummer's aux and he wants his reverb on his snare too. So now I just pull that snare verb channel up and there you go. So it just, again, just makes things a little easier, makes your workflow a little bit more smooth.
Jason?
Yes.
We have a participant that would like you to review. He says, how do I access a suggested effect that corresponds to a particular channel? So if you could review going into the channel and then bringing up that effect.
Okay.
For him, that would be awesome.
So going into a channel itself. So if I'm going to go into a channel, I'm going to select, you know, whatever. Let's get away from my drums here. Let's pick something different. Like guitar. If I want to put something on a guitar, I can go into his channel by pressing the name above the fader. That gets you into the channel strip. And then you have all of your channel strip settings in here, which you can navigate to through the tabs. So you're going to want to select the effects tab. This is how we're going to be routing this channel to any of our effects here. And it's as simple as grabbing that slider to the corresponding effect that you want to apply to this channel and moving it up. You can either move it up with your finger on the glass, or you can touch it and then use your encoder wheel to adjust its level. That's it. And then if you wanted a little bit of guidance on as to what kind of effects to put on different channels, that would be where the wizard comes in handy. And you can use this menu tree here to kind of whittle down and get yourself down to a number of applicable effects and presets that would apply to your whatever your channel is there. So hope that answered that question. If there are, we could take another couple questions here. I know we're a bit over time. There is one kind of cool trick I wanted to put out there. I know we're over time. If you got to go, I understand. But if you give me just another couple of minutes here, I actually wanted to run through how to apply some of these things in a more real world setting. And to do that, I was going to kind of run you through how to set up a really sweet vocal channel. And this is something that was actually taught to me by John Graves. John Graves is the product manager for TouchMix here. He is a recording and front of house, big venue mix engineer legend. He's got decades of knowledge doing this stuff, and he is the main mind behind this product, and a lot of the features and a lot of the tools on here kind of came from him. So I'm going to walk you through kind of his process of applying some effects to a male vocal to really get it to sound, or not necessarily a male vocal, but a vocal channel to get it to sound really, really sweet. And it actually involves a combination of effects. It's not just applying one effect here. So what the effects I'm going to use, I'm just going to go into my channel. I'm going to kind of just reset everything that I've been doing so far to set this up from scratch. But I'm going to use a reverb. I'm also going to use a delay, okay? So I'm not just applying a single effect or a single type of effect to the channel. I'm gonna actually blend a few effects together to get a really, really cool overall effect and an overall coloration to the channel. And so that's going to be a reverb with a delay as well. And then the last effect I'm gonna use is actually a pitch shifter. And I'm gonna use that just to thicken it up a little bit. And all of these things are going to be used very subtly, and they're going to kind of work in conjunction with each other to give you a really nice overall sound. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a delay. I'm going to start with a delay. I'm going to start with a mono delay. So I'm going to dial up this mono delay. And ideally, you could kind of set this up to the tempo of this song. A lot of people kind of just go with that. You kind of pick either the quarter note or the eighth note of the song and go from that. And that's fine. That usually sounds good. But if you actually offset it slightly, it can create a really cool additional effect and an additional sort of coloration to it, other than just kind of keeping it on the direct notes there. But a good starting point usually is the either the quarter or the eighth note. So I'll play my track here, and I'm just going to find the eighth note real quick and set this. So if I get my playback, hit tap tempo. So it's about. Okay. There's my. It's about 201 on the eighth note there. Sounds about right. Now what I'm going to do, before I apply this, I'm going to stop, step. I'm going to select this field and I'm going to manually nudge this. I'm just going to smear it a little bit so it's not exactly on time. I'm going to take it down just a couple. Oops, other way. So we got 201 was what it was set to. I'm going to take it to like 198. So I'm just offsetting it very slightly. And it's going to give you a really cool coloration here. Okay, so that is that. Now we're going to dial this up. So it's kind of sitting just under the vocal. And I'm going to re-engage my solo here just so we can hear this isolated. I'll play my tracks. And I'm going to get this going. There we go. So I'll take it up to an extreme level so you can hear the effect, so you hear what it's doing. If I take it down so it just is sitting kind of underneath the channel, it's not overly obvious. Say something. Yeah. So that's pretty good. Okay, now I'm actually going to come in here. I'm going to mute that guy for now. So we don't want to hear that. Now I'm going to pick stop playback. Now I'm going to work with my reverb. I'm going to choose my reverb, and again, the reverb is going to be slightly subjective and based on the style of music that you're working with and what your or your song or how tight you want it to sound or how big or grand. For this, I think I'm going to just stick with my my hall here because that sounded pretty good, and I'll dial this up. See if I can get it into the song. Here we go. Get it up kind of high. And we'll do the same thing. We'll just kind of seat this right under, so it's kind of underneath the channel. A little more. All right, so we can hear it, right? But it's subtle. Now I mute that. I'll stop that for a second. Now I'm going to go into my pitch shifter. And you do have a preset in here that's called light detune, and that'll give you, plus or minus 5 cents on your left and your right, and then it'll give you a 20 millisecond delay on the right channel only. I'm actually going to reduce these a little bit. I want this to be very, very, very mild. I'm going to take these down to plus and minus. Oops, come on, find control. Plus and minus 3 on our left and our right, and then I'm going to just apply 5 milliseconds of delay on the right channel. And I'm also going to take the low cut here up to 200. Okay, now we'll quickly dial this in, and I want to, okay, hear that. So now we can really hear what that pitch shifter is doing. It's very obvious. But again, I'm going to take this down just very subtly. So you can, so it's more of a feeling than an actual application. Okay, now I can go back into all these and unmute them. Bam. Now those three things together, take that down a little more. Give us a really, really, really nice, full and present vocal channel. And if I bring my mix back in, sounds good. He sits really well in the mix. He's got a lot of presence. And he's got a really nice coloration to him. Sounds good. So there you go. So that's sort of a trick, or also a way of hopefully getting your creativity going. So you don't necessarily have to just apply one single effect to a channel. You can use combos, you can blend them. Think of it like cooking, right? You can either just dump a whole bunch of salt on something, or you can use a little salt, a little pepper, a little oregano, a little garlic. You know, you kind of like use a little bit of a couple of different things, and it creates different flavors, and you can create some really cool textures using the different effects and different combinations and applications. So there you go. One other cool tip that I thought was cool. You might notice if you've got the 24 channel scene here is that the two backing vocals are actually panned hard left. And the reason that is done is because when this mix is to be completed, I can say I actually have my effect 6 here panned hard right. What I would do, I would set this up as a delay. Yep, already on a delay. And then in my two backup channels, I would bring that up rather significantly. And then what you end up with is the dry channels actually coming out of your left side only, and then that the delay effect coming out of the right channel, and it gives you a really cool sort of panned delay effect that sits really well behind the mix and behind your lead vocalist. So that's another kind of neat trick there that you might want to play with. And that is it. Look, I made it, guys. Only 20 minutes overtime. But yeah, so that's kind of the end of the lesson here. If there are some questions, I can answer one or two. I know we are a little bit over, but I don't want to leave anybody in the dust. So what you got? If you got questions, I'd be happy to take one or two of them at this point. No?
It doesn't look like there's any right now, no.
Oh, well, cool. Awesome. Well, then I hope this was helpful for you guys. I hope I showed you some cool tricks and get your brains going, give you some ideas on how to use the effects and be a little creative with them. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you guys watching this. My mouth is extremely dry right now, so I'm gonna stop talking at this point. Check your email for the video so you can come back and rewatch any of this if you need to, and go sign up for the next webinars. We've got 2 next week that deal with recording, so those are going to be a lot of fun. In the following week, we got a couple of more. They're going to explore some other applications and other features on TouchMix that are really useful. So I'll go ahead and close it with that. Thanks everybody, and have a wonderful day.